Jewish influence in music?
I know mostly, in the United States, an amazing group of Jewish American songwriters starting around the 1920s invented the whole kind of popular music that was flourishing in Broadway and in Hollywood all the way from the 1920s to the 1960s. It's almost like it was a Jewish business where you'd have people like Irving Berlin is probably famous, and the funny thing about Irving Berlin is that he wrote White Christmas, which is a very, very famous song. I don't know if people know it here, but I'm dreaming of a white Christmas because he was Jewish.
Easter Parade.
He wrote Easter Parade. And I always laugh, say Christians wouldn't have any holidays if it weren't for Irving Berlin. Then you have Jerome Kern, who wrote Showboat, many, many great songs, and of course George Gershwin. The only one that wasn't Jewish was a man named Cole Porter, who was a very great songwriter. But all the others, and that continued all the way even in today, where we have Stephen Sondheim and Carole King and Bob Dylan and Billy Joel, and still even today there are so many Jewish musicians in that business. And I think it might be I don't know all the answers, but I think that Jewish immigrants were of all the immigrants that came, they were the most accepting and understanding of the African American experience. They had been victims. They had been persecuted in Europe, and they understood. Not all of them, of course, but many of them understood and sympathized with the struggles of African Americans, and so they accepted that music as part of the mix of music they would work with. And I think without that, you can't really have an American music. You have to have some connection, to African American music because it's so fundamental to American music. So I think other groups were a little less accepting of that, whereas Jews are more. And I think that actually at first it created a bond. We find many Jews involved in starting African American organizations like the NAACP and things like that. But then later it became a tension, as African Americans, quite rightly, wanted to follow their own destinies and did not want as many Jews to be as involved in their activities. I think now it's getting better again, as we're getting back to a world where I would like to think that we'd be less, who knows how it's going to, where it's going to lead to. But certainly back in the 1920s, as George Gershwin would say, he used to go up to Harlem, where African American neighborhood, and he would listen to all these black pianists, and he'd watch them play, and he took lessons from one of them to see how do you do that piano playing, and so he understood that was fundamental to integrate that into the music he loved. So I think that's part of it. There are probably many other reasons. I don't think it's anything necessarily intrinsic that Jews are just born that way. I think it's more cultural. But
why?
What?
Why are there so many Jews in America that are musicians and good musicians and famous?
I think Jews, first of all, once it starts, it becomes a normal thing, and so once it's already established, it's easier for Jews to say, "Oh, my Uncle Benny's a musician, or my cousin Fred's a musician, or my grandfather Isaac was." So it starts to become more acceptable.
Because usually they say. Yeah. Jewish moms say, "I want you to be a doctor, an attorney."
That is true.
Yes. So how is it that they become musicians?
Well, you have to. I don't know. I mean, I've never been not a Jew, so I don't know what it's like not to be a Jew. But I know from an early age I loved music. I didn't think of myself as a Jew who liked music. I just loved music. I was drawn to it. My parents were like you would say, but many parents, they loved the fact that I played music as a hobby, but they weren't happy with the profession. But I often tell people, if you can't tell your parents, listen, I don't care what you think, this is what I want, then you probably shouldn't go into music, because it's a very tough business. And if you can't tell your parents this is what you want to do, it's going to crush you anyway. You can't survive. It's too tough a business. So, it's okay for parents to be against it, because kids will figure their own way. But I don't know. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, I guess ultimately I think It's partly that connection to African American. It's partly that it became so common for Jews to be in music that it then became more of a career path that people could see, you know. But but ultimately, I think it's a bit of a mystery.
A mistake?
But
A bit of
it's a bit of a mystery, even so,
mystery.
even with some explanations.
And what would you tell the Jewish kids that want to be musicians?
It has to be more than what you want. It has to be something that you can't imagine not doing.
Wow.
If you could think, well, I could be a musician, but maybe I'll be a lawyer, be a lawyer. But if you think, if I don't be a musician, I don't know if I can survive, go. And then you have to go for it incredibly hard. You can't do it half-heartedly. You know, you really have to devote a lot of energy. And all successful musicians say that. They say it's just, you really have to put in the hours. There's no shortcut, no amount of talent. No amount of talent gives you instant access to real brilliance and creativity. You really have to work and work and work. And then you have to really want, you can't imagine anything else in your life. You can't imagine that you could be anything else. You have to need it more than want it.